Hello and welcome to my studio. I'm getting ready to do another painting. This time it's going to be a rather large one, a 26 inch by 32 inch, and it's of a vintage airplane that I saw when I was visiting the Gig Harbor Vintage Aero Museum recently. If you haven't been there, you should stop and see it. It's near the airport at Gig Harbor, and they have some really well-kept old vintage airplanes and cars, and it's definitely worth a stop. So the one I'm going to paint was inspired by their I believe it's a 1953 Cessna. It's called a Cessna 195 Businessliner, and it's a red and white airplane, single prop. I believe they call it single prop. And it has lots of lovely 50s touches to it that just immediately caught my eye, and I just knew I wanted to try painting it. So let me show you the photos I took to start with. Here's the photo I took of that Cessna airplane at the museum. As you can see, it's inside the hangar, and so that means it's lit by ceiling lights. And I decided to take it from this angle because I wanted to create a little bit more drama than just taking a photo directly from the side would be. I also decided that I wanted, in my painting, I'm going to relocate the plane to outdoors, and I'm going to change the white areas on the plane to chrome. The reason I decided to do that was I wanted to increase the drama of the plane, and I wanted reflections on it. And chrome will show reflections much better than the white paint would. So I had to do quite a bit of making things up when I made that decision, because of course there's not a lot of reflections in my photograph and it's not outdoors. So that was kind of fun, and let me show you where I've got to so far with my drawing. Here's my drawing. I've spent several days working on this, and you can see it's pretty detailed, which for the type of watercolor painting that I'm going to be doing, I find it to be very necessary to spend some time with the drawing. I'm going to come down here to the nose cone and just show you an example of one of the reflections that I made up. I have some buildings over here, hangars, and a couple of people walking around. Here's a windsock. There's some clouds in the sky. Over here, you can barely see it, but there's a little plane that's flying up amongst the clouds. And of course I have lots of rivets. I don't know if I'm going to paint all of those, but so a lot of those I think will kind of be pushed back a little bit when I get the paint on it. And another thing that I tend to do, you can see on this cover for the wheel, you can see that I have written little initials, like here's an R that stands for red. Here's a BL that stands for blue. Here's an SH that stands for shadow. Those are just little clues that remind me of what color something's supposed to be whenever I have a really complicated drawing. And I do have to remember to erase that before I put paint on, so otherwise they would show through. But it helps keep me on track when I have a complicated drawing like this with lots of reflections. So the next thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of masking fluid here and there where I want to save the whites. And for those of you that have watched my videos before, you'll remember that wherever you paint on masking fluid and let it dry, that you can paint around it and paint won't get on that spot. And then when you're all done with your painting, you can just rub the masking fluid off, and there's some white paper underneath. And that's very useful, especially if you have very tiny little white spots that you need to save. And I definitely prefer saving the whites of the paper over adding white paint on top because I like the look of it better. So that's what I'm going to do next. I've finished putting on the masking fluid. I tinted it with just a little bit of azo yellow watercolor paint so that I could see it when I put it on this white paper. And you can see that it has kind of a little bit of a shine to it if you're, looking at it just right. And I just have that here and there kind of sparingly on this particular painting. But wherever I wanted to save little white spots on my plane, I made sure and put that on. The next thing I needed to do was figure out what colors to use in my painting. The main color of the plane was really easy because it was already this beautiful shade of red. And I just needed to figure out variations of red to use between the light and the dark part of the red. And I knew I wanted to move the plane outside and have it be blue skies with little fluffy clouds up in the sky. But I struggled a little bit with the color of the runway, the color of the chrome part of the plane, and I'll show you kind of what I ended up deciding on. Whenever I'm trying to figure out what colors I want to use together, I find some leftover pieces of watercolor paper and I practice making some different mixes. So you can see here I was playing with different colors for the red of the airplane. And down here I was playing with different colors for the runway and the shadow of the plane. Here I was working on what color the sky and the clouds were going to be and what color the chrome part of the plane were going to be. And this helps me immensely to do this work ahead of time. I used to just go for it on my paintings, and I think that's part of the reason why I had trouble sometimes and had to throw my early paintings away because I hadn't done my testing separately. I'd tested it on the painting and that didn't always work. So at any rate, this is what I think I'm going to do. It's basically going to be kind of a bluish background with that pretty bright red of the plane. And these are the colors that I am tentatively planning on using. 3 different colors of blue, a cerulean blue, a cobalt teal, and a cobalt blue. Also a neutral tint and a Winsor violet. And I'll have those up in the clouds just a little bit to create some of the shadows in the clouds. And then for the plane, it's the red part of the plane. I'm going to be using the cadmium red light, the pyrrole red, and a lovely paint called Brown Matter, which is really more of a rusty red. It's not so much of a brown color. So let's see how that works. can see I have a sky area that's pretty blue, and then a runway area that's fairly gray, which is a little bit of cobalt teal. Where they meet is just kind of a soft fuzzy line. So not a lot of detail in this background. I'm saving the detail for the plane. And this is the point that I'm always like, oh, gosh, I sure hope this is going to work out. But I think, I think what's bugging me is just the gray of the runway. I want it to be some other color, but that is the color of runways. I think by the time I get the shadow on there and all this detail, that it will look a lot different. So that's my hope. I think what I'm going to start on next is the chrome areas of the plane, which, if you recall, on my color samples here, it's going to look fairly similar to the runway colors, just a little bit darker. So I'll have some cobalt teal, cerulean blue, and neutral tint kind of mingled together. And I'll just work on one little section at a time. And I'm going to erase the little letters reminding me of what that color stands for. So let's get started. I've finished the first layer of the chrome on the plane. So now that chrome is showing the reflections of the blue sky with the fluffy clouds on the upper part of the plane, and the chrome on the lower part of the plane is showing reflections of the runway. It still doesn't have the shadows on the runway. I'm going to add all those later, and I'll have to add the details, like the details in the reflections, like the hangars and the little people and the little flying plane, and I'll do that later. First, I think I want to go ahead with putting the reds on the plane, just because I'm anxious to see how it's all going to work together. Remember that I'm going to be using 3 different reds. From light to dark, I'll be doing a cadmium red light, then a pyro red, and then brown madder. So let's see how that goes. Okay, I think I have most of the red in. You can see that I have the body in, and it goes from light to dark, and I have highlights on these little bumps that are on this front part of the plane. There's kind of a hint of a reflection of the hanger right there. I've got these stripes here kind of reflected on the underside of the wing. And then I have the red stripes on these wheel covers. This wheel cover is reflected there. I might darken that just a little bit, we'll see. And then this wheel cover is kind of interesting. It's got the main stripes that are on it. Then it's got this kind of reflection wrapping around. That's going to be the other side of the plane, the far side that we can't see. But this wheel is sticking out that way. And so it's going to see a little bit of the far side of the plane. And this will be the wing in a minute. And then also the underside of the plane is reflecting the some of the stripes that we're seeing on here. So hopefully that all makes sense. I just had to kind of make up a lot of those reflections. But I think I'm ready to move on to working in the reflections in the chrome. I'm pretty happy with the chrome reflections. You can see up in this area, the chrome is reflecting the sky with the clouds and a tiny little airplane. On the nose cone, it's reflecting some background airplane hangars with some mountains, a couple of people walking, and a windsock. And here's a yellow stripe on the runway. Down here, I have some shadows. It's reflecting the shadows that will eventually be underneath the plane. They're not there yet. And then here it's reflecting some of the plane on the other side and some of the runway. Up here, it's some more hangars with that yellow directional marker. And then down here, some more airplane hangars with another little plane. So what I need to work on next is this area. I think I'll start with this. I forgot this is actually the sky that I left off. So I'm going to fill that in first. And the little tiny bit of the tail, the beginning of the tail that you can see right there. And then I need to put in some shadows here. Color, I'll figure out something for the windows, and then I'll put a nice little shadow down there. So let's see how that goes. Here's what we have now. I still have masking fluid on various places on the plane. But I think before I deal with that, I'm gonna go ahead and put the shadows in on the runway and do the tires. And that's because some of the masking fluid is right next to where I'm gonna be painting those shadows. So I think I'll make it a little easier on myself by just keeping that in place, and then the last step will be removing the masking fluid and tidying up the edges. Okay. my shadows in. I'm happy with how that turned out. Got my wheels in. I think the only thing left is I need to remove my masking fluid in the areas that I have that. And then I'll have to fine tune each of those areas. So when I remove it, I'm using this rubber cement eraser. It's going to create this really white hard area. So it's kind of like, feels kind of like gooey rubber cement sort of. But wherever I put it down, it helped keep paint off those areas. So I'll go through and remove all this, and then I'm going to have to go fine tune all of those kind of hard edges, soften them up just a little bit. And then hopefully we'll be done. Okay, so here it goes.